Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Educated Colin Snap channel. How are you guys doing? So, today we will be covering the Series 4 and Series 5 cards, what to buy, what to avoid, what to look for. Now, I've kind of not done this because I'm basically of the belief that most cards you should wait till they become Series 3 to buy. But there are still some exceptions, and there's also still people that have already completed Series 3. What do I think will be viable? What do I think will be useful? Now, keep in mind that these tier lists are objective and they come with some assumptions, right? So they're kind of thinking about current power level or what there will be on release, and they also are subject to change, right? So let's say I did this tier list a while back, right? Zabu and Surfer would be significantly higher on that tier list than they would be on this one, right? So nerfs can change things, and just how cards interact with the meta can also change their evaluation. So always keep that in mind when you are making these purchases. I do think if you have already completed Series 3, you don't have to be too worried about making a bad purchase, but especially if you haven't completed Series 3, then these decisions could be pretty impactful. But overall, that's just the intro. Let's get into it. So here we have the first three. I will say that I kind of ordered them or tiered them in a proper ordering. So this is kind of like the best purchase and then moving down. But here we have the first three purchases, and these are really the only three Series 4 or Series 5 cards that I think you can even consider purchasing before you've completed Series 3. So every other card, I would say, don't even consider. Uh, but these three, they have their reasons. So the first two, Thanos and Galactus, the reason why I would say you can consider buying these even before Series 3 completion is because they are going to be Series 5 cards for the foreseeable future. So they're pretty much always going to cost 6,000 tokens for quite a while. So even though you invest 6,000 tokens, you're not going to have that situation where 3 months later, these guys get a drop down and now they're only worth 3,000 tokens. And then you've wasted 3,000 tokens before completing Series 3. Such a huge pain point. So because there there's that reliability that they're always going to be expensive, you can actually justify spending time waiting and then purchasing them. Now, I do think you have to be careful before buying either Thanos or Galactus, but they have their reasons why you could argue, okay, save up for these two cards. They're always going to be worth 6,000 tokens. You're not losing too much. All right. So I do have Thanos first. The reason why I have Thanos first is that I think Thanos is more competitively viable than Galactus. Now, does that mean Galactus is bad? No. Does that mean Galactus is um, not to be used or to be avoided? No, absolutely not. If you like Galactus, you like the playstyle, definitely pick up Galactus. I just think Thanos is a more flexible card that can more likely stand the test of time. So if you only had one choice and you're like, okay, only one you get, I would lean Thanos, but I do think Galactus has its uses and has its play patterns. So that's why Galactus is number one spot. But I think Galactus is right there next to him, number two. Now the third one is the only other card I could justify people that haven't completed Series 3 making the purchase for, and that would be Shuri. I think Shuri is probably best card in the game, or at least in comfortably in the top three cards, and just a very, very strong card that if you want to save up for, I wouldn't hate that decision. Now, this is a card I could see getting nerfed. So keep in mind that you might spend 3,000 tokens. It gets dropped down to the power level of Zabu and Silver Surfer. And now you're feeling a little bit bad about your purchase. So you have to be very careful with these um, purchases of cards that will eventually become Series 3. But if you really like Shuri, you don't have much else you want to buy, and you're like, okay, I want to win right now in this meta. Next meta, nerfs, whatever, be damned. Then I do think Shuri is the only card that will be dropped down to Series 3 that I think you can pick up before you've completed Series 3. Next up, we have the after Series 3 completion. So these are the cards that I think you should be looking at if you completed Series 3 or you're super close to completing Series 3 and you want to pick up a card just to try it, see if they work, see if they're interesting. These are the ones, these next 9 are the ones I would be looking at. Really only the next 6. The other 3 are like solid cards that um, are generally good, but I don't know if I would be spending that 6,000 tokens on them or whatever price they are. So here, the first one up, we have Kang, right? So Kang is the new 5 cost 0 power. It basically restarts the turn without Kang in it. This is basically the Daredevil effect, but can be used on 6. So this is a really, really, I think, toxic card in my opinion, because it kind of warps how the game is played. Instead of being scared of a turn 6 and what they're going to do, now you have that knowledge of, oh, they were planning on playing this card, and that really gives you the freedom either to stay in or leave. So I don't personally think this card is healthy for the game. I don't think this is what is good about this style of gameplay. Being able to know exactly what your opponent is going to do on the final turn most of the time is just too problematic, too toxic. Definitely gives me leader level vibes of toxicity. But I do think it's going to be a good card. You're only spending 1 card slot, and usually people have, 3 or so cards in their hands. So you're not losing too much to play a Kang in your deck. So I do think this can be a very powerful tool to just make sure that you're not doing anything stupid or not being hit by anything unexpected, anything surprising. So yeah, definitely think this is going to be a playable card, and definitely one that you can try playing with and seeing how good it actually is. Next up, we have the Living Tribunal. Now, this card can be super solid if you have a very singularly powerful or singularly strong location deck. So things like Black Panther can really raise the stats of a location, and then there's also some locations themselves that can really make very, very crazy stat lines. And the Living Tribunal can say, okay, these crazy stat lines, I'm going to divide them throughout your 3 locations. So you can really catch people off guard. You can really surprise them. You can really manipulate the points that are on your side of the board. Another thing to keep in mind is you can do this on, you can play Magic and something and have that extra turn to really mess with the situation. So I do think this card will find a use. You can definitely build completely new compositions around this card, and that's really cool, really interesting. So I'm definitely interested to see how this card turns out. I will say that the 4 cards from February are not in the game yet, so we don't really know what the overall power level will be, but I do think they all 4 of them are very interesting. That's why they're all in this after Series 3 completion. You can consider buying them. Next up, we have Ghost. I think Ghost will be, like, eventually once it moves down to Series 3, will be a staple in control decks. I just think the ability to always be on the reaction part of the equation when you're playing a control deck is just so strong. You guarantee the Shang-Chi, you guarantee the Enchantress, you guarantee the Killmonger, you guarantee whatever other combo cards you're going to need so that initiative doesn't matter. You can be ahead on the board and still guarantee those priority units. So I think Ghost, very cheap, right? 1 mana for 2 is very solid, but then it has such a powerful effect in the right compositions that I think this is definitely a card that's going to see play. I can't imagine this not seeing play. So this is definitely a card I think could be good, but most likely you're gonna see it significantly more once it drops down to Series 3. Sorin, I think Sorin is pretty safe that this is a good card. The main drawback of Sorin is that the deck archetypes are very one-dimensional. You can't really make a ton of comps with Sorin at the moment, so it has that inflexibility. But in the deck types it does work in, it works very well. So it's a good card, worth thinking about if you have completed Series 3, but isn't too interesting. You kind of already know whether you are going to play with Sorin Shuri decks or not. Next up, we have Bast. So I think Bast has a decent amount of uses. You can play it in a couple of different options, whether it's negative or rush decks or cerebro decks. There are a lot of options for Bast, and it is usually consistent and one of the more powerful tools in those decks. So definitely think this card is proven itself to being good and is a card you can think of picking up after you complete Series 3. And then the last one of these proven or interesting cards is Stature. So Stature is a 5/7, but if your opponent discarded a card last turn, it costs 1. So a lot of times when you're playing this is going to be a 1 mana 7 power, which is just so strong. 1 mana 7 power is extremely powerful. So I do think this can be a very powerful tool. What's most likely going to happen is you discard or you get the effect of proc on turn 5, and then turn 6 you can play this and a 5-drop. Most likely something like Arrow or something else that's really big or really impactful. So maybe like Stature and Shang-Chi, right? There's so many ways to do it. So I do think this will be a powerful card. The one issue with this card is it doesn't really fit in too many decks. You have to have this discard synergy in your deck. So that's the one limiting thing. But the effect is so strong that I still think this is worth looking at and deciding whether you want to play it into your deck. So kind of like a Sorin in how it functions, in that it's a very inflexible card, but the cards, when you can play it, it's very strong. So those are the 6 I think are proven interesting. Definitely worth picking up if you have already completed Series 3. Next up, we have the solid cards. So these cards are good. They're solid, but they don't stand out. They're not as interesting as other cards. So you can pick them up, and I do think they're solid, or I'm gonna say that a lot, right? That's why it has the solid tier list, because I'm saying solid for these cards automatically. But they're not interesting, and you kind of already know what to expect. So, and they don't stand out in too much anyway, where you're like, they're so good that you have to play them. Will be totally fine not picking these up and waiting till they drop down. You're not going to be missing too much, but they are still good cards. So we have Black Panther, Null, and Valkyrie. They all have viable decks. They all do work in the decks that they provide, but they're not really played in a ton of compositions. They really have those 1 or 2 archetype niches that they work well in, and then they aren't really flexible into other arc compositions. But they are good. They are strong. If those are the cards you're missing in your core composition and you really want to upgrade, you can definitely pick them up. I wouldn't really fault you for that. All right, next up we have the wait for drop down cards. So these cards I don't recommend, basically. I don't think you should be spending your tokens on them before they drop down to Series 3. So once they drop down to Series 3, then I would say, yeah, you can pick them up. Yeah, they might be more playable, but I wouldn't spend the 3,000 tokens or even the 6,000 tokens to pick them up early. So essentially, almost every Series 4 or 5 card, you're basically all you're buying is the opportunity to use them early. That's really all you're buying. You're getting maybe a 3-month head start or maybe a 4-month head start on most of these cards. So you're not really going to, you're still going to see these cards later down the road. You're just going to be able to use them much earlier than most other people will. So are these cards worth getting early? At the moment, right, my answer would be no. That can change with meta changes, with introductions of new cards. Old cards can be a lot better, etc. But currently, February 2023, these cards, I would say just wait for them to drop down to Series 3. So they're still they're still tiered. I still decided to tier them. But basically, you're not going to be picking these up. But we're still going to talk about them. Zabu, Silver Surfer, Darkhawk. These 3 cards really dominated the last meta, but they all got inadvertently nerfed or directly nerfed. And now they're not as prominent. You don't really see that too much. I will say Zabu is still pretty common in Mr. Negative decks, but the other 2 um, aren't as prominent. You won't see them too often. They're more niche now. Super Skull, I think, is decent counter. Anytime the meta has really strong ongoings, you can play Super Scroll and it can do a lot of work for you. So I think this card is decent. And Dazzler is a strong card. It's just kind of hard to fit in a lot of archetypes. And usually you can find replacements for this card fairly easily. That's kind of its weakness. You don't need this card like in a lot of your decks. It's not a core card. It's just like a nice little ooh, like nice little ooh, but not core. So wouldn't really spend 6,000 tokens on that. I would just wait for it to drop down. Now we have these cards a little bit down. They're all right. They have their niches, but they're not anything special. And I wouldn't say you should like really invest too much. These are cards you might get randomly and feel like, oh, okay, I guess maybe I could try them, but you're not gonna feel super happy about picking any of these up. So we have Agent Colstein. This one's really for Dino decks. It also works well with Quinjet, but I wouldn't spend the tokens on them. Then you have Orca and Altuma. These are like strong, big bodies, but they need some kind of prior requisites which make them a little bit awkward. They're not as clean to play. So I don't particularly love these cards. Then we have M'Baku, Maria Hill, Shanna, Hellcarrier. All these cards aren't really that powerful. They're okay cards. Like you can play M'Baku and Cerebro too. You can play Maria Hero and Dino. You can play Shauna and Zoo decks, and you can play Harry and discard. But you don't need them, right? You don't. They're not. You're not gonna miss them if you remove them from your deck. You're gonna be like, okay, yeah, I guess I could just switch it for something else. So that's kind of the problem with these cards. They don't force you to remember them, I guess is what I would say. They're just okay or bad and just not really the most impactful cards in the game. And then Sentry, Shadow King, I think these cards are either bad or inflexible. I think Sentry is just so hard to get a viable deck for it right now. I tried making one today, and I really realized, it's actually kind of hard to make one that feels clean or feels like something I would like to play. That feels pretty bad for the card. And then Shadow King, I just don't. I'm biased. I don't like this card. I think there's not enough benefits to justify playing this over like a Shang-Chi or an Enchantress or a Killmonger. I just don't think this does enough or really justifies its place in the deck list. So not a fan of this card here. So overall, those are the tier lists, basically covering all the Series 4, Series 5 cards for February 2023. I do want to continue doing this. I heard good feedback for the Series 3 tier list, so I think it's good to do these once a month just to kind of let you know what the metagame looks like, what you should be thinking about buying, what you should think about avoiding. But overall, that is the video. Hope you guys liked it. Hope you guys enjoy it. I'll see you guys in the next one.